Hello, my beautiful co-creators. Lilou here on the Juicy Living Tour. And today I'm back in Montreal, straight from Quebec City, actually, and meeting again Lawrence, because Lawrence has this amazing story to share with us. Profound, touching, moving, but really it goes all the way up to touching the light, feeling the light throughout a near-death experience. So this is a very powerful story. Lawrence right now is sitting on a wheelchair, and you've been on a wheelchair for how long?
It'll be 34 years in 2 weeks. A celebration.
What happened on that day?
I had just finished winning a squash tournament, and I was on my way home, and it started to rain, so I decided to wait till after the rain. And not too far from here, on a Trans-Canada highway where you go by the airport, whenever jets take off, they leave a little JP fuel behind them. And that summer, the summer of '77, was a very nice summer, no rain, and it just accumulated. And in the rain, oil and water don't mix. At the time, the speed limits were 70 miles an hour. I hit a pole at 70 miles an hour. And as I like to tell people, you learn two things if you hit a pole at 70 miles an hour. The first thing is that the car stops real quick. In a nanosecond of perception, I made that observation. Nothing ever stopped so fast before in my life. The second thing is that anything inside that car does not stop. It gets stopped. And I was stopped by the steering wheel, which broke my ribs here and here and here, the sternum, the clavicle, the spinal cord, the spine itself, left arm, right hip, fractured skull, tore through my lungs. I was declared dead 4 times. I spent 6 weeks in intensive care and 11 months in the hospital. So it was a heck of an ordeal. But contrary to what people might think, I often challenge groups when I'm doing training. You know, I don't know how you would react in that circumstance, but there's an old line in a Bob Dylan song that says, "You don't know what you've got till it's gone." And to have seen myself out of my body, to see my dead body there, and to realize that my life was over was an incredible awakening, an awakening that, you know, please give me another chance if I get another chance. And in my book, I describe myself as the luckiest man on earth, because here I am and I've got a second chance, you know, and not only declared dead, but declared dead 4 times. So between those times, as you can imagine, I had 10,000 questions. And each time, all of my questions were totally answered in a nanosecond. So my mind was changed by the experience. And
so you mean that each time you had this experience of death, that some people call near-death experience, right? You were in this place where you had the choice to come back or not. You remember everything?
I have 4 death experiences, 2 that I have complete recall of. And neither one of those that I feel that I had a choice. That's not the way I perceived it. I'm not saying that the choice wasn't there, but to me, I didn't do anything. I experienced this, and in the same way I'm experiencing life right now. And as a matter of fact, I can tell you that during that ordeal, at certain points, the pain was so intense that I wanted to die. And I didn't, and I couldn't. And at one moment, when I was now under drugs and I was able to suffer less from the pain, I didn't want to die, and I was out of my body. And as strange as it may seem, this comforted me. It gave me the feeling that about my moment of death, I've got nothing to say. I wanted to die and couldn't. I didn't want to die, and here I was dead. You know, so I'm just going to do my very best and see what happens. And that's what I did, and it turned out to be really the best thing you can possibly do, you know, to worry or stress yourself about things over which you have no control versus just giving that control, surrendering to that higher power, you know. People often ask me if I was a believer or if I had values before my accident, and of course the answer is yes. You know, in my entire life, I never had one occasion to doubt the existence of God, you know, but in that pure light experience that I had, it was confirmed. you know. So as I mentioned in a video that I did once before, you know, before I had a God that I could visit every once in a while, but in that confirmation, in that pure light experience, now I have a God that is just omnipresent. It's there all the time. I just can't, it's not even something you'd want to avoid, eh? It's the creative power that links us all, so it's wondrous.
How do you explain that you had to go through 4 times to really, is it get it, or really what's that process about, or is it just we can't reason this thing?
No, I think you know, first of all, there's hitting that pole, you know, that in and of itself has got a momentum. Things happen, you know, and my experience of that one is suddenly being in an absolute darkness and wanting to see, you know, as soon as I thought I'm in darkness, as soon as that, you know, that first thought, then I saw light, and wanting to approach the light, I felt myself move at outstanding speeds, and as I approached the light, it seemed like a window, and then I saw it as my own eye that I was seeing from the inside, and click, I was alive and awake, and I could feel a hand holding my eye open. There was a flashlight looking in. The doctor said, his eyes are glassy, he's dead. Then it closed, and I was in the darkness, and I lifted my left arm, and for the first instant, such incredible pain. Now we know it was broken, but at the time I kept moving, and I removed the contact lens, and I said, are they still glassy? And then everybody just freaked out, because apparently I had been dead for a while, and they were just proving it, you know what I mean? Less dead than they thought, you know. So that was the first time. Now of that, just, you know, nothing mystical except this darkness and moving at light, and you're realizing, and you know, no time to think about it, you're just in intense pain and so forth. Then they moved me from the hospital where I was to the Neurological Institute downtown Montreal, you know, experts in that kind of care, you know, I mean, paralyzed from here down and so forth. So they moved me there, and then the next day, again, we didn't know, you know, they're taking care of emergencies, eh? I mean, I'm really badly broken here. So they didn't know that the lungs were torn. So they're slowly filling with blood. Oh. And then I'm drowning. So I flatline, and an emergency tracheotomy. They cut the throat, they drain it, 1.5 liters of blood. They took out of the lungs, you know what I mean? So
you were in your blood.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was dead again, they told me. But of that, I have no experience, no memory, nothing at all. The third day, my heart just stopped, you know, tired of the fight and everything else. Then I saw myself out of my body. I saw a doctor who had spent the night in a chair there get up quickly. He came over to, it looked like he was going to punch my heart to start it. I'm watching it from the ceiling perspective, you know what I mean? And at the last second, he stops and he says, come back for Natalie's sake. And when I heard that, I felt filled with love. I felt filled with love, you know, like a balloon, like expand with love. I rose through the ceiling. I was out of the hospital. I was moving up towards Cosmos at top speeds. I kept expanding in love, and then I exploded into 100 billion bits of light, and I was back in my body. The doctor later said that just as he was about to hit me, he realized all my ribs were broken, my sternum, my clavicle, everything. He says it was like hitting jello. I would have killed you. He says he didn't know I had a daughter, he didn't know her name. Yeah, exactly. Myself, in that experience, that pure light experience, I gave myself an appointment with destiny. I had to figure this out and focused all my attention on getting well, that's all. My next death experience, which is my 4th death experience, happened 15 months after that. After I left the hospital, you know, I started doing meditation, contemplation, a lot of exercise, a lot of solitary journeys in the woods and everything else. I was trying to find myself. Very
different from your life before, huh?
Well, when I was in the hospital that one year, you know, I went within to find out what had given me joy in my life, you know what I mean? And I knew I'd have to tap into that joy because there was nothing pretty up ahead, you know, it was a steep road to climb. When I got out of the hospital, they gave me a life expectancy of 5 to 7 years because of the internal damages. I could live 0 pounds with my left arm, 8 pounds with my right arm, paralyzed from here down, no balance, you know, I had no clue what it could be. But in going within, I discovered that everything that had given me joy in my life up until the moment I hit was related to nature. You know, I was a skier, a fisherman, a camper. Nothing gave me greater pleasure than going with my daughter off into the woods and looking for elves. And almost every time we'd find them, you know what I mean? We come real close. But
on a material level, what were you doing as a job before?
I was national sales manager for a paper company.
Okay. So you were having pretty strict schedule. You were traveling, or you were having some strong work
ethic. Work ethic, things to do with my life, and so on and so forth. And play hard, work hard, and all of that attitude. You know, again, people ask me if I had that kind of a winning attitude before, and I have to say yes. I mean, there was nothing positive in the death experience, except that it really hurts a lot and you don't want to go through that twice. So then it's self-examination, you know, and in the self-examination, to discover that I love nature. Okay, if I've only got 5 to 7 years life, that's what I want to do with it. I want to spend as much time in nature. It felt like a calling. I had no idea why or where, but that was my place, and I started doing that. And I would take any trail. There's a provincial park not too far from here. I'd take any trail until I was arm weary, and then I'd have to come back, you know what I mean, to find my car. And I share with people that there's no greater pleasure than coming down a nice hill in a wheelchair. There's no greater job than go back up that hill at the end of the afternoon when you're tired, you know what I mean? But you haven't found your car yet, and the sun is starting to set, and you start thinking about wolves and bears, and that gives you the adrenaline to keep going. And in that adrenaline, you're building up strength. And the doctors weren't far wrong. The first 5-7 years, I was back in the hospital with all kinds of emergencies, including the one that led to my 4th death, you know what I mean? But every time I'd get back into that routine of, you know, taking a trail and going. And what happened is that I stopped many times alone in the woods, you know, and starting to just observe what's going on, just seeing patterns in nature. And I started to get it. I started to understand nature's management rules, management principles, and it became a passion to discover more. So today, from James Bay in the Great White North to Alaska out west, all the way down to Panama, I know the territory like my hand. I've studied these ecosystems. I know these management principles. It's become, you know, and I venture to say that the passion that it's given me, that it has never been a broken body that wakes up some morning and decides, I think I'll go explore that jungle. That's not the way it works. You know, the spirit, the passion says, I'd like to see that. And then the body, well, let's organize it so that, you know, we get there. You know what I mean? So
this has never stopped you?
Never once. You know, I mean, it stopped me, but only for a moment. I've had some adventures that you just wouldn't want to believe. You know what I mean? I was 4.5 hours by pirogue up in the jungle when I discovered what rainforest really means in a wheelchair. It rusted out and just collapsed beneath me. So in that moment in time, you decide, I shouldn't be here. There's too much danger. I got to get out of here. Or how can I make sure this doesn't happen again? And for the last 15 years or 20 years, I've had a jungle chair entirely made of stainless steel and mountain bike tires. La Pantera, it goes anywhere, you know what I mean?
You always found a solution and a way to do things. But what was your question, back a little bit, what was your 10,000 questions that you had in your mind, and how got those answered?
I'll tell you that everything was answered, and it's easy enough to get in my 4th death experience, okay? In my 4th death, well, I must say that I had an out-of-body experience between the 3rd and the 4th death experience. Okay. So that was a great discovery, because I realized that it wasn't death that allowed me to see pure light. Death interrupted my inner dialogue. Stopping my inner dialogue allowed me to see pure light. So you don't have to die, you know? And that was a great awakening, and I started doing great strides. In that pure light experience, I saw pure light, and I wanted, as usual, to go towards it. I mean, that was the first instinct. So off I go, and before I reach, there's a huge wall that stops me. So in that sense that you were saying before, was there a choice, or you were told to go back? I'm supposing that wall would be saying go back. You know what I mean? That would be it. But I could see the light pouring over the wall. So I want to see over the wall, and I rise up and I can see. And it, you know, the pure light experience, you can describe it in any way. You're seeing God face to face. It's God. You know, I mean, you adore. You understand everything. You know, it's oneness. There's just one light. So division makes no sense. You know, and everything else. So I was amazed. I was amazed at how God was appearing out of nothingness. You know, the darkness, a single point, and the more you focused, the more it was nothing at all. So imagine black hole with pure light pouring out of it. And then I got curious. I'm Mr. Curious, and I wanted to see what the light was doing. So I turned to see what the light was doing. It was doing everything. The light is everywhere. The light is everything. Every plant, every person, you know, it is the consciousness. You know, at the level of consciousness, then energy, then subatom, then atom, then molecule, and then the skin matter, and then rocks and death and stuff, you know. So the light is everything, God is everywhere, you know. That was that, you know what I mean? So that brought me all of those answers. I no longer had fear, you know, no idea of fear. It started pushing me in my practices, my meditation practices, my solitary wandering in the wood practices. And I'm not saying that every decision I took was a smart decision. I'm saying that I got myself into some amazing jackpots, but I didn't panic ever. And things happen, you know, and the last 25 years with Susie, and together we've had so many extraordinary adventures, and we've been in so many jackpots you can't imagine, you know.
What do you call a jackpot?
We drove from Montreal to Panama one summer. It took us 18 days, and in that we were inside of 2 hurricanes and 3 earthquakes. And then when we got there, we were isolated inside of a small valley because all of the bridges had collapsed and landslides and everything else for 5 weeks. And yet, we'll still talk about it, about the best vacation we ever had. Every single thing you could imagine as disastrous wasn't. It just worked out. People were kind. Everything was good, you know. Disaster for me in a wheelchair is being alone in the wood, and I'm trying to see over some hill, and because of how my wheelchair is, I can't go any further. I can't go backwards. I can't go to the left. I can't go to the right, or I'll fall, and picking myself up and back up is very, very difficult, and there's nobody else around, and the sun is falling down. What do you do? What do you do? Well, you laugh for being such a jerk to get yourself in that position in the first place. And in that laughter, something happens. You know, Susie and I, give you an example, concrete. We got to some beach one day, and it was all sand, and sand in wheelchairs is terrible, as you can imagine. And some guard comes over and says, if you want to examine the rainforest, the jungle, take that trail. All the sand is hard packed. So we said okay, and we went off on that trail. It was wonderful. We were gone maybe 45 minutes, and all of a sudden the sky opens, and you know what a rainforest is. A deluge of rain, and our beautiful path was now erased. And from here to your camera, it took me 5 minutes, and you're sweating bullets, and you got a long ways to go. What do you do? What do you do? Well, you laugh. What a jerk for being in this position. And just then, some Costa Rican jogger comes by. Guy in super shape, great body. Superman. He looks like he's super fit. I said, hey, amigo. He comes over, and I said, you look like you like to keep in shape. He says, yeah. I said, I got a great exercise for you. You know what I mean? And together, we just made our way to the jungle, had a beer. He became a great friend. You know what I mean?
So much more fun.
So much more. Why panic? You know what I mean? Not only if you panic, not only are you in a jackpot, but now you're panicking. That doesn't help. You know what I mean? No. Things happen. Solutions occur. There's no problem on this earth that does not have a solution. The solution is its perfect contradiction to the problem. I've been telling people for years now to buy the greatest book in the world, the Dictionary of Antonyms. The Dictionary of Contradictions. And whenever you have a problem, reduce it to a word or two, and then go look. And then that'll give you the direction. Head in the other direction, you know. The wisdom of fools rush in where angels fear to tread, you know what I mean? So go in the other direction. Take the path less traveled, you know.
So before we get into the fourth death experience, how do you relate now to your reality? How do you see reality?
I see human beings in a process of awakening. you know. And really, myself, what's helped me in this process is my link to nature. Some people will call it the shamanic path or the sorcerer's path, but to learn nature's mysteries and secrets, to find out that I am a part of nature, not apart from nature, you know. So I take my place in nature, equal to it all, you know, worthy of it all, confident like all of it. I don't think birds wake up in the morning and start stressing themselves if they're going to find worms or bugs to eat. You know, I mean, the bees are up here in this penthouse in downtown Montreal, and you know they're finding good stuff. You know, it's all organic, so everything's all right. You know, but human beings worry. You know, I mean, we've lost really a lot of our natural instincts, and through the training programs that we offer, self-empowerment programs that we offer, we give that back to people. You know, I don't mind whatever your philosophy is, but is it giving you personal power? Is it allowing you to experience joy on a day-to-day basis? And if not, there may be a few adjustments you can make, you know what I mean, to get into it. Yeah.
So this reality, where I wanted to get to, is that this reality is not really as tangible or as static as it seems. There's so much more that most of us have not seen or been exposed to and raised at, and our understanding is just, we need to expand that understanding more, don't we?
Well, we have to see with really emotional maturity. Because we're talking nowadays, and we teach it in corporations and everything else, emotional intelligence. And that means this, that these 100 billion neurons that we have, which is our intelligence, our brain, all of them linked together by a tiny space called a synapse. And that synapse, you know, your thoughts will go in one direction or another direction depending on what neurotransmitter is in that synapse. And that synapse, that neurotransmitter, is selected by mood, by hormones. So if you're afraid, every reason on this God's earth why it's good to be afraid and why you have to arm yourself against the bad guys and everything else will come to mind. This is the intelligence that you're linking together. But if you're going, you know, with your heart, every reason on earth why, okay, we can see people are broken and troubled and we have to protect ourselves from the crazies, but it doesn't mean that, and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? So, yes, we have this intelligence, but it's an emotional intelligence. And we have to take responsibility for that, you know, at least in our own lives, you know, because how many people are sabotaging themselves because they live there. They live in fear, they live in pettiness, they live in anger, they live in areas that attract those kinds of thoughts and give them that kind of karma. You know what I mean? So it's not as if destiny does it. This is why we bring people into the jungle. You know, in the jungle, it's immediate. If you're in the jungle, I tell people, and if you want to be angry at life, you're allowed. It's okay. But don't forget that you'll be the lunch. You know, you'll be giving off that signal, that chemical signal, those pheromones. The predators will smell it and, you know, all right, we'll go for this one. You know, it's as easy as that. And human beings, we can hide in our, you know, little boxes here, and you know the neighbors don't know, and we live quiet lives of desperation. No, we've become denatured, and the closer we can get back to our authentic selves, the happier we'll be.
Beautiful. What a juicy conversation. Gee, so the fourth, what brought the fourth death experience to your life?
After my Pure Light experience, as I said, you know, that out-of-body experience, I discovered something. I'll tell you about a very mystical experience that happened right after that. That experience really shook me to the core, you know, that realization that you don't have to die to see pure light. You know, death stops your dialogue, but you can just stop your dialogue, and that's what I did, and I saw pure light. So, but it was so profound in my own experience that I wanted to get away from that for a bit, take a holiday from that. You know, I'd been meditating intensively and everything else. So when I was in the hospital, I'd received all kinds of books from people as gifts because people knew I was a great reader, including a whole series of Agatha Christie books. So I decided to get just a novel to take my mind off of the heavy stuff, if you will. And I went into where the box was, and a book jumped out of the box and landed on my lap. And that shocked me. And on the back of the book, there was a guy meditating against a dark blue sky, and it was exactly what I didn't want to see. So I took it and I threw it. And it didn't hit the corner of the room, and it came back and it landed on my lap again, the cover side up. And the cover side was orange, the same profile, the same guy meditating, but different profile, orange. And the book is called Evolutionary Energy by Gopi Krishna. So I opened it up, and I read at the very beginning that the book is written for somebody who might have had an experience like his. And he describes an out-of-body experience that he had, and how as a result of that he became extremely ill for a long time, and to be very careful and so on. So okay, so I was kind of warned. I was looking around to see what would happen. I continued with my routine. I had a TV interview a couple of days later, which I did, and then about 3 or 4 days after, I got sick, like a flu maybe, I thought, fever, and then very high fever, and then finally my ex-wife took the decision. She sent an ambulance to I was living alone. She sent an ambulance, and they rushed me to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, fever of 105 or something like that, they gave me an injection, massive injection of antibiotic in my right hip, saying it was a bladder infection, which is common for paraplegics and so forth and so on. And afterwards, they gave me a prescription for more antibiotic, and they asked me if I wanted to go home or spend the night in the hospital. I wanted to go home. They put me in the ambulance, took me home, and I woke up the next morning around 8 o'clock. The fever had broken. It was the first time in a few days that I felt okay. My first thought was I wanted to take a bath. I pulled the sheet off me. My right leg was fire engine red. As I got to my hip, it was dark blue, black. At the site where they injected me, the skin was putrid and falling apart. So I knew there was something bad here. I took my bath as I had to. I put an antiseptic on it, a Band-Aid. I drove myself to the hospital. I went to the urology clinic. I went to my doctor, and I said, I want to show you something. I dropped my pants, and he freaked out. And right away, flesh-eating disease, even though they didn't have that as a diagnosis, but that's what was happening. He phones emergency, the 7th floor surgery and everything else. I go up to there. They're sterilizing a bed to receive me. Everybody's in a panic. I'm feeling pretty good. I was happy to notice that over the bed there was a small TV set. I had the intuition that I'd be there for a while, that feeling. I knew, oh, this is not good, And on the TV, which was on, there was an interview. It was the one I had recorded a couple of days before. So the nurses and the people cleaning the bed and I stopped to listen to myself, and people liked the philosophy. Everything was good, but at a certain moment I said, excuse me, and then I just passed out. I just, everything just gave way. A couple of orderlies grabbed me. They put me to bed. They're rushing me to surgery. They took out 4 by 4 inch all the way to the bone. They cauterized the wound. I was in the hospital for 3 months, but after that surgery, when I was in the recovery room, I was suddenly at the foot of my bed looking at my body. And when I saw that the machine was flatlining. And a nurse ran over, and she set the machine, and she said to me, I don't remember exactly what, but I answered her to say I'm all right. And as I answered her, I was in my body. And I was answering her, and I was hearing myself answer her as if it wasn't even me talking. It was me talking, but I didn't know what I was saying. Mm-hmm. And I was listening, and I was learning, and I was saying that my body was highly infectious, and that being in it, I was fighting against it, that I had to leave it so it could find its own defenses. Mm. She was asking me if I'm sure and everything else. I was back on, she reset her machines. I was back at the foot of my bed. She the machine went off again. She ran back or turned around suddenly again. I was back in my body talking. This happened 4 times in a row, just like that, from the foot of my bed, inside my body. And then I convinced her that I was all right, that I wasn't going to die, that it wasn't going to happen. And then she turned the machine off, and she sat next to my bed. And she said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I'm fine." Then I was at the foot of my bed. I was watching. I got a feeling of something behind me, and I went to turn around, but before I could turn around and see, it was as if I was sucked in a vacuum cleaner, a vortex. As I was being sucked away, I could see people, and their positions in the room, because this was a recovery room, there were several doctors, nurses, several beds and everything, like bubbles of energy. And the bubbles that were just coming unstuck. They weren't really stuck together. And then in the vortex, into complete blackness, pure light, and then I thought I was dead for sure. I thought I was in paradise for sure. It was green, it was beautiful, it was lush. I could feel it, like I was convinced I was dead. It was paradise. I even asked, is this paradise? And I heard an answer as clear as day, no, Costa Rica. Yeah. From that experience, I was there watching, learning from dreamers, what I call Jaguar Kings in my stories. I tell springboard stories. You don't have to believe them, but they're vehicles for information. And these are dreamers, and they were graduating dreaming. And the way they graduate dreaming, there's a wall about 1,000 feet, 1,000 meters, 3,000 feet, I would say. You know, I mean, a vertical, like Grand Canyon, vertical wall, and there's a waterfall, and there's a cavern behind the waterfall. And they're in there, and they're meditating, and when they're ready, they dive through. And if they wake up where they want to, they're master dreamers. And if they don't, they're dead. They don't graduate. Los Valaderos, part of the Jaguar King. I learned all about it, and then woke up as if waking up from a dream. And I'll tell you that for many years, Susie, I'll tell you exactly how many years, I was convinced it was a dream. Until we found the actual place in Costa Rica, Las Tumbas in Costa Rica, the exact place, the exact waterfall, the exact same as it was 1,500 years before Christ. So I dreamed somewhere into the past. I don't know if I was dead or not. And then I came out of my dream, and then I told the nurse who was still sitting there that I was okay. And she said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes." And she got up and she walked maybe 3 steps and she collapsed. They took her to emergency. I found out later that she had been at rigid attention sitting next to me for a shift and a half. I was in a hospital for 3 months, and then they cut me open and reconstructed that hole that they put there and everything else. And when I got out, and I had tried to find this nurse. I wanted to thank her. I wanted to talk to her about it. I wanted to try to resonate with her. I tried to ask people stuff. People didn't know what I was talking about. And, you know, already I knew to only speak to who could understand. Other than that, you're only scaring people. So, okay. And then when I got out of the hospital, maybe a month afterwards, I was in my office, my company that was not too far from here. And an attractive woman walks in and comes over to me and asked me if I knew who she was. And I said, no, I didn't recognize her at all. She said, "I'm the nurse that sat next to you." Okay, and I still didn't recognize her, but I wasn't really, you know, getting a focused view on her, you know. But we had a long talk, about 2 hours, you know, very, very intensive talk in my office there. She was no longer a nurse. She had quit. She could not understand how come her colleagues never intervened.
Yes. What was the reaction in all of that to doctors?
Nothing. No reaction.
Pretending it didn't happen?
For them, it didn't happen. You know, it only happened for me.
You were considered dead. For how long?
She flatlined the machine. She turned the machine off and left me there, or sat with me there, for 1.5 shifts of her time, which would be like maybe 12 hours or 10 hours or something like that she sat.
Were there other people that stopped by?
No one came over to her. No one spoke to her. No one interfered. No one asked her why the machine was flatlined. Nobody did anything with her. That's why that she had many questions of her own. Later, I found out what that is. I mean, you know, when we're all
what is it?
Well, we're all connected, but we're connected by a hyperspace. You know, we're connected by no-thingness. You know, so you know that's what makes the whole greater than the sum of its parts. You take all of the parts, and now you have to add that every single part is surrounded by a hyperspace, a no-thingness. That no-thingness. Well, all of it, the something and the nothing are both God, you know what I mean? But you have to allow for the no-thingness at all time. When I was being sucked into this vortex, I saw that what looks like a continuity was really separate little bubbles. So that timeline bubble that she and I shared, others did not experience it that way. I have no idea how they experienced it. I didn't interview them and everything else. I know that she said that she could no longer stay inside of operating rooms and recovery rooms and places with no windows and no link to outside. And she was now a pharmaceutical rep driving around the beautiful province, and she's never been happier. So changed her life by forcing her to look at, different aspects of this reality that we take to be concrete in some sense, and we know isn't. It's energy, so we discuss it, we measure it, we talk about it, we're amazed by it, and then we go home as if it wasn't true anymore, and it's always true. So it's always wonderful. It gives us an incredible potential all of the time if we just take our place and see ourselves as energy too,
Well, this is quite... in French, we have this word, c'est scotchant. We have that.
Splendid. Pas français, oui, absolutely.
We're going to do this in French too, but wow. So these were your 4 experiences, totally life-changing, transforming for everybody that is exposed to this information. I really feel this should be shared. This is the type of information that should be shared around the world. This is time to get these stories out to people so we can all realize really that it's just there's pure potential here for us, and we're on this planet. It's just not to just pay the bills and go in this life doing those systematic things every day.
Exactly. No, there's an evolution.
It's a jungle.
Well, it's a jungle out there in a very real sense, but we are the king of the jungle, We are the meanest or best, depending on how you look at it, predator that's ever lived on this earth. Let's take responsibility for it, There is higher evolution. When I talk about nature's management processes, I have a workshop that I'm giving to all kinds of corporations. I've trained more than 30,000 corporate leaders in terms of understanding how nature manages.
This is needed in corporations.
Absolutely, but because they see things in the material way instead of the organic way. And if you see it in the organic way, because it is organic, then you can manage it in that way. If you're managing people as if they're things, well, it's clear recipe for failure. And no matter how big and how powerful you are, if you take a look at the Fortune 500 top companies of 1990, you'll find that most of them aren't on the list anymore. They're just extinct, you know what I mean? So it's not survival of the strongest or survival of the most ferocious. It's survival of the wisest. And the wisest, wisdom is this capacity to adapt to new conditions. I was what I was, and suddenly I hit a pole and I have a pure light and death experience. Am I still the same guy if I pretend it never happened? If I pretend that, but if I embrace that change and I say, all right, the way I looked at it at the time, I was national sales manager for a large company. Instantly, I thought, God needs a salesman. I'll do the job. I don't mind. It's easy as that. But I don't have any religiosity tied to that. It surrounds me, and the best example I can bring, and people are transformed by it, is our week tours in Costa Rica. Because Costa Rica fits into the beautiful province of Quebec 30 times, about the size of West Virginia in the U.S. It's a tiny little country, and so far we've listed more than 500,000 species, all of them survivors, all of them winners, all of them with a creative strategy, all of them with a tale to tell, And when we bring corporate leaders there, it's apparent that the only species that's not in its place is the human being. It's apparent, everything else is doing its level best to be part of this transformative process. And nature is managing this continuous transformation in terms of the chaos regime, the transition regime, and the ordered regime. And if we manage our own lives in the same way, they become blessed. We become lucky, The chaos regime is everything that must be changed. So take a look at your life. What needs to be changed? What was it about me that deserved hitting a pole at 70 miles an hour? I wasn't a bad guy. I just didn't think about those things like most. I didn't think that burning the candle at both ends would catch up with you. You don't think that if you work, and you're stressed while you're going through this inner dialogue, you're not in touch with the highway. You know what I mean? Driving in the highway is a left brain thing, and if you haven't seen the last 5 miles go by, you're too far into your right brain, And in my right brain, there was no pole. There was no storm. You're off in your own mind, and you're not paying attention. So we call it an accident, but Really? You know, so what is it about me? I can tell you that ever since then I haven't hit those speeds in the rain. Wouldn't even enter my mind, because now I've got the experience that you hit a pole at 70 miles an hour, it really hurts for a long, long time, you know what I mean? So, okay, so transformation, chaos regime, what must be changed? And then the transition regime. Change doesn't happen by itself. You know, it needs a plan, needs a strategy, needs tools, you need help, you need whatever it is, you get it. And the ordered regime, you know, what's ideal, what's best, what would you like? You know, I tell people, imagine that you're 70 years old and you're on your balcony in your rocking chair. You know, look back at your life. Of what are you the most proud? What gave you the greatest joy? Where did you invest the most love? That'll be important. And all of the rest of it won't count. Like, with a breath of kindness, just blow it away. It doesn't matter, you know what I mean? But that exercise, it has to be done. What gives you joy? And then transition. What do you have to change? You know what I mean?
The juiciness of life, huh?
The juiciness of life, you know what I mean? So I'm still 33 years later paralyzed from here down, but I added passion, you know what I mean? So I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I'd rather be walking. But that's not an option, you know what I mean? So long as I'm not, what can I do? Everything else. Everything else.
Well, my beautiful co-creators, we send you much love, huh, from Montreal, Quebec, lots of light.
Open heart.
Open heart.
Open heart.
Because love is all there is, huh?
Love is all there is. Limitless oscillations of vibrating energy. That's all there is, you know? Big, big world all made up of this limitless oscillations of vibrating energy. Love, yeah, for sure.
With an open heart. We say you bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Two things if you hit a pole at 70 miles an hour. The first thing is that the car stops real quick. In a nanosecond of perception, I made that observation. Nothing ever stopped so fast before in my life. The second thing is that anything inside that car does not stop. It gets stopped. And I was stopped by the steering wheel, which broke my ribs here and here and here, and the sternum, the clavicle, the spinal cord, the spine itself, left arm, right hip, fractured skull, tore through my lungs. I was declared dead 4 times. I spent 6 weeks in intensive care and 11 months in the hospital. So it was a heck of an ordeal. But contrary to what people might think, I often challenge groups when I'm doing training. You know, I don't know how you would react in that circumstance, but there's an old line in a Bob Dylan song that says, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And to have seen myself out of my body, to see my dead body there, and to realize that my life was over was an incredible awakening, that, you know, please give me another chance if I get another chance. And in my book, I describe myself as the luckiest man on earth, because here I am and I've got a second chance, you know, and not only declared dead, but declared dead 4 times. So between those times, as you can imagine, I had 10,000 questions. And each time, all of my questions were totally answered in a nanosecond. So my mind was changed by the experience. And
so you mean that each time you had this experience of death, that some people call near-death experience, right? You were in this place where you had the choice to come back or not. You remember everything?
I have 4 death experiences, 2 that I have complete recall of. And neither one of those that I feel that I had a choice. That's not the way I perceived it. I'm not saying that the choice wasn't there, but to me, I didn't do anything. I experienced this, and in the same way I'm experiencing life right now. As a matter of fact, I can tell you that during that ordeal, at certain points, the pain was so intense that I wanted to die. And I didn't, and I couldn't. And at one moment when I was now under drugs and I was able to...
How do you explain that you had to go through 4 times to really... Is it get it, or really what's that process about? Or is it just we can't reason this thing?
No, I think, first of all, there's hitting that pole. That in and of itself has got a momentum. Things happen, and my experience of that one is suddenly being in an absolute darkness and wanting to see, as soon as I thought I'm in darkness, as soon as that first thought, then I saw light, and wanting to approach the light, I felt myself move at outstanding speeds, and as I approached the light, it seemed like a window, and then I saw it as my own eye that I was seeing from the inside, and click, I was alive and awake, and I could feel a hand holding my eye open. There was a flashlight looking in. The doctor said his eyes are glassy, he's dead. Then it closed, and I was in the darkness, and I lifted my left arm, and for the first instant, such incredible pain. Now we know it was broken, but at the time I kept moving, and I removed the contact lens, and I said, "Are they still glassy?" And then everybody just freaked out, because apparently I had been dead for a while, and they were just proving it.
Hello, my beautiful co-creators. Lilou here on the Juicy Living Tour. And today I'm back in Montreal, straight from Quebec City, actually, and meeting, again, Lawrence, because Lawrence has this amazing story to share with us. Profound, touching, moving, but really, it goes all the way up to touching the light, feeling the light throughout a near-death experience. So this is a very powerful story. Lawrence right now is sitting on a wheelchair, and you've been on a wheelchair for how long?
It'll be 34 years in 2 weeks. A celebration.
What happened on that day?
I had just finished winning a squash tournament, and I was on my way home, and it started to rain, so I decided to wait till after the rain. And not too far from here, on the Trans-Canada Highway where you go by the airport, whenever jets take off, they leave a little JP fuel behind them. And that summer, the summer of '77, was a very nice summer, no rain, and it just accumulated. And in the rain, oil and water don't mix. At the time, the speed limits were 70 miles an hour. I hit a pole at 70 miles an hour. And as I like to tell people, you learn suffer less from the pain. I didn't want to die, and I was out of my body. And as strange as it may seem, this comforted me. It gave me the feeling that about my moment of death, I've got nothing to say. I wanted to die and couldn't. I didn't want to die, and here I was dead. So I'm just going to do my very best and see what happens. And that's what I did, and it turned out to be really the best thing you can possibly do, to worry or stress yourself about things over which you have no control versus just giving that control, surrendering to that higher power, People often ask me if I was a believer or if I had values before my accident, and of course the answer is yes. In my entire life, I never had one occasion to doubt the existence of God, but in that pure light experience that I had, it was confirmed. So as I mentioned in a video that I did once before, before I had a God that I could visit every once in a while, but in that confirmation, in that pure light experience, now I have a God that is just omnipresent. It's there all the time. I just can't, it's not even something you'd want to avoid. It's the creative power that links us all. So it's wondrous.